You're sitting there reading a modern English Bible, right? And you skim over this very specific word. I mean, you've probably seen it 1,000 times. The word Lord, printed in those distinctive small capital letters.
Right, yeah.
It looks so solid, right?
Yeah.
Like this linguistic anchor drops straight from antiquity onto the page. But what are you actually reading?
Well, that typography is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah.
It really gives the illusion of perfect, unbroken transmission. But the reality is far more complex, which is exactly why our exploration into the source material today is so critical.
Definitely. And for this exploration into the source material, we're looking at a historical and archaeological document titled Lesson 1, Analyzing the Evidence, right?
Exactly. And our goal is to strip away centuries of assumptions, to trace the 2,000-year chain of human choices that put that specific word on the page in front of you.
Right. We want to figure out what is hard, documented archaeological evidence and what is just, well, historical inference.
And right up front, I should say, we are not taking any theological signs today. The mandate here is to impartially report on what the ancient manuscripts, the dirt, and the inscriptions actually preserve, and just as importantly, what they don't.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction.
Absolutely. So if you look at my background right now, you'll see I've switched my view to this dimly lit room filled with ancient fragmentary parchment scrolls and massive stone inscriptions. That is the world we are stepping into.
Okay, let's unpack this. To make sense of that ancient world, we first have to, deconstruct that modern word sitting right there on the page. How do the 4 Hebrew consonants of the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, somehow turn into an English title?
Well, it starts with this really fascinating linguistic shift in early Jewish tradition. Scribes and readers began substituting the spoken word Adonai, which means Lord or my Lord, whenever they encountered the written consonants YHWH in the text.
So the substitution started entirely as an oral tradition, right?
Yeah, exactly. Then, when the Hebrew scriptures were first translated into Greek, creating the foundational collection known as the Septuagint, the scribes primarily used the Greek word kurios.
And that means master or ruler, right?
Correct. And then centuries later, Jerome translated that Greek into the Latin Vulgate using the Latin equivalent Dominus.
Wow. Okay, so when it finally came time to translate Dominus into English, translators needed a social equivalent, and they chose the word Lord, which incredibly comes from the Old English word hlafwerd.
Yeah, the loaf guardian.
Right. It literally translates to loaf guardian or the keeper of the household bread. I mean, this is essentially a 2-millennium-long game of historical telephone, but instead of passing along the sound of the word, translators were passing along the social rank of the word.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the King James translators basically standardized this practice in English.
Using the small caps, you mean?
Exactly. They used Lord in those small caps for that unrecoverable Hebrew term, effectively collapsing multiple ancient concepts into a single English word. We're looking at evidence of usage, a translation tradition, not evidence of the origin of the divine name itself.
Okay, since that translation chain completely obscures the original word, let's bypass the translators entirely. Let's go into that dimly lit room of yours and dig in the dirt. What does the oldest physical evidence actually preserve?
Well, the archaeology reveals a really highly nuanced picture. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, show massive scribal diversity.
How so? What were they doing differently?
Some scribes wrote YHWH in Paleo-Hebrew, which is an older, distinct alphabet style used centuries prior, just to make the name visually stand out from the surrounding standard script.
Oh, wow, like a visual highlighter.
Yeah, exactly. Others replace it entirely with 4 dots, or they just used titles like Elohim.
What about stone or metal, though? Like hard physical evidence that we dug up?
Well, we have the Kitef Hinnom amulets from the 7th century BCE. These are tiny silver scrolls found near Jerusalem that contain the priestly blessing, making them the oldest artifacts we have with YHWH on them.
Okay, so 7th century BCE.
Right. There is also the Misha stele from the 9th century BCE, a stone monument where a Moabite king boasts about his conflict with Israel and actually mentions YHWH.
Interesting. Any others?
Yeah, we have the Elephantine papyri from the 5th century BCE. These are Aramaic documents from a Jewish military colony in Egypt showing a shortened form, YHW, used by people observing Passover.
Wait a second. If we have silver amulets and stone monuments with the letters YHWH carved right into them, doesn't that solve the mystery? We found the name?
Well, that requires a strict distinction between observation and interpretation. We observe that the letters are there, but ancient Hebrew only used consonants.
Oh, right. No vowels.
Exactly. None of these artifacts come with pronunciation guide, a dictionary definition, or, a little footnote saying, by the way, this is the exact name revealed to Moses.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they just prove the letters existed.
Right. They prove the consonants were widely used in the region during those centuries. They do not prove how they were spoken or what they originally meant.
So those artifacts put us in the 9th to 5th centuries BCE. But according to the biblical narrative, Moses received this revelation much earlier at the burning bush. Does the physical evidence stretch back that far?
I mean, no. There is a massive chronological gap. Moses is traditionally dated to the 15th or maybe the 13th century BCE.
Okay.
But the earliest undisputed epigraphic evidence, meaning actual physical inscriptions carved into stone or metal, is from the 9th century BCE. So that is a 400 to 700 year gap.
But wait, isn't there an older Egyptian inscription that mentions the Shasu of Hu? I've heard of that.
There is, yeah. But scholars heavily debate whether Hu in that context refers to a geographic place, a nomadic tribe, or an actual deity. The evidence just isn't conclusive.
I see.
And this brings up an even larger historical issue regarding the language Moses actually spoke.
Right, because he was raised in Pharaoh's household in Egypt and then lived in Midian, where they would have spoken a local Semitic dialect.
Exactly. Standardized Biblical Hebrew, which is the language the surviving manuscripts are written in, well, didn't even exist yet.
So what does this all mean? I mean, assuming Moses originally wrote down the Exodus account in standard biblical Hebrew is like assuming Julius Caesar wrote his military journals in modern Italian just because that's the language of Rome today.
That is a perfect analogy, yeah.
We are completely confusing the language of the surviving copy with the language of the event itself.
Precisely. If the original revelation at the burning bush happened in Egyptian or, some Midianite dialect, those 4 Hebrew letters, YHWH, might actually be a later Hebrew translation.
Or like an adaptation or editorial update.
Exactly. They might not be a literal phonetic transcript of what was actually spoken in that moment.
Man, okay. If the original pronunciation was lost in that chronological gap, we really need to talk about how we ended up with the names people recognize today. Like, where does a name like Yehovah come from?
To get to Jehovah, we have to fast forward over 1,000 years after Moses to between the 7th and 10th centuries CE.
That is a huge jump.
It is. A group of Jewish scribes, known as the Masoretes, standardized the Hebrew text. And you have to remember, ancient Hebrew didn't actually have written vowels. It was a consonant-only language.
Right, just like we talked about earlier.
So to preserve their oral reading tradition, the Masoretes invented a system of vowel points, which are these little dots and dashes added around the consonants.
And the oral tradition at that time was to say Adonai when you saw YHWH on the page. Right?
Exactly. So the scribes took the newly invented vowel points for the word Adonai and inserted them into the consonants YHWH. It was simply a visual cue to the reader.
Like when you see these consonants, use the substitute word.
Yes. But someone misunderstood the cue.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Later on, a medieval Christian scholar looked at that text and didn't realize it was a visual hybrid. He combined the consonants of YHWH with the vowels of Adonai and accidentally created a brand new word, Jehovah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Are you saying that Jehovah is essentially a medieval typo? That it appears in absolutely 0 ancient manuscripts?
I am. Jehovah is a documented historical misunderstanding. It is not an ancient pronunciation.
That is just wild.
And this raises an important question. If this universally recognized name is actually a medieval hybrid, how many other things do we take as ancient, unchanging facts that are actually the result of medieval scribal misinterpretations?
That is mind-bending, but it really brings everything full circle for you listening right now. Why does this long, complicated linguistic chain matter to you?
I think it comes down to intellectual humility.
Exactly. Reading any text, especially a sacred one, requires a deep sense of intellectual humility. When you sit down, open that book, and read the word Lord, you aren't reading the creator's original self-designation.
Right. You are reading a translator's decision made on your behalf.
Yes. It's the end result of editorial choices, substitutions, and misunderstandings stretching across millennia.
And to leave you with one final, fascinating textual mystery to mull over on your own, look closely at the Hebrew text of Exodus 3.
What happens there?
Well, when Moses asks what he should say, he is actually given 2 different answers. In verse 14, he is told to say, Yehweh, which translates to I am or I will be, has sent him.
Okay.
But in the very next verse, the speaker restarts with a totally new speech formula and says YHWH sent him.
Wait, it answers the same question twice with two different names.
Yes. Does this intentional wordplay mean a single author was making a profound theological point? Or does it reveal two entirely different ancient literary traditions that a later editor stitched together?
Wow.
The text survives, but the ultimate origin of that moment remains a mystery.
So the next time you see those small capital letters anchoring the page, remember, they aren't a solid pillar of certainty. You are looking through complex strata of archaeological and historical filters.
Every word has a history.
Exactly. And digging through those layers is where the real story lives.